And welcome to 31 Who for the second day of our celebration of all that is Doctor Who.
In just a few minutes we blast off with one of the longest stories in the Doctor Who series, War Games.
During the day we have 3 complete Doctor Who adventures, the Dominators, the Mind Robber and the 3 Doctors.
And there's a rarely seen documentary, our own extended look at special effects and the technology of Doctor Who, ending with a full-length feature film, Daleks Invasion Earth 2050 AD. Here's a glimpse of the Doctors in action.
You wanted advice, you said. I never give it, never. But I might just say this to you. Always search for truth.
Well, why? What's going to happen?
Now, Joe, please do as I ask. And do exactly as I tell you. Do you promise?
All right, I promise.
Contact. Contact.
Please.
But who was that?
Me!
Me! Oh, my word! Zoe! Zoe! Oh.
Surely you were...
Dead? Not at all, my boy. Not at all. I was merely, let me say, frozen stiff.
Those who oppose the will of Omega shall not live. Destroy him!
Oh, dragging me! Oh. Concentrate, both of you! Oh, it's too strong!
It's the Doctors!
Oh, yes, yes, of course. Come along, come along.
The TARDIS! Safe and sound by all that's wonderful!
Now, at this point, we hope to be able to contact one of the Doctors. If this works, that is. Jon Pertwee, welcome to 31 Who. How did you get your job as the Doctor?
I was making a program called The Navy Lark, and an actor called Teniel Evans said to me, why don't you put yourself up for Doctor Who? I understand Patrick Troughton is leaving. And so I suggested it to my agent, and there was a terrible pause on the other end of the phone. And I said, yes, all right, it's not such a good idea, I understand. And he said, no, I don't think it's a very good idea, but I'll try. And he rang up and he spoke to Derek Sherwin, who was the then producer. And he said, I've got a suggestion to take over from Patrick Troughton, my client Jon Pertwee. And there was a very, very long pause at the other end of the telephone. And Richard Stone, my agent, said, yes, I had exactly the same reaction. And Derek Sherman said, no, you got it wrong. He said, may I read you my short list? And Richard said, I'd like to hear it, yes. And he said, well, your client's name, Jon Pertwee, is number 2 on our short list and has been for 18 months. So there was an extraordinary thing that I put myself up for a job that I'd been considered for 18 months without knowing it.
Well, the show was at the height of its popularity then. Were you a fan?
No, not really. My first wife, Jean Marsh, was in Doctor Who, and she suggested that I tuned in and watched her, which I did, and I thought it was splendid. I thought it was very good indeed. I liked enormously the performance by Doctor Who #1, William Hartnell. But I haven't watched a lot of it since. I haven't had much chance after I left it. I used to watch it when I was on, but then I'm my type.
Did you have a favourite monster?
Yes, I did. I didn't like the Daleks very much. They looked like a lot of tennis balls stuck on some cardboard with a sink pump and an egg whisk. I liked the Draconians because the Draconians were wonderful, knobbly-faced characters with coxcomb headdresses, and they had big sort of lumps all over their faces. Because they were using half masks then, which you had this, which just showed the human eye, but left the mouth alone, so that you had this full movement of the mouth. What was wrong, I think, with the early monsters like Ice Warriors and Cybermen was that when they spoke, they spoke like it's nothing rude, you see, and it's all the Dalek voices who came from the bowels of the earth. I liked seeing faces move and eyes being shown. You can have no expression without the human mouth or without the eye.
Are you still recognised as Doctor Who?
Yes, with a nose like mine, it'd be hard not to be. There's not another nose like this in show business. I'm either recognised as three people, as Doctor Who, which is sort of popular, Jon Pertwee, which is very popular because one likes to be remembered for oneself and what one has done, apart from two big culty successes, and Wurzel Gummidge, which the kids recognise. This rather shook me, of course, because I was firmly under the impression that under that great big rubber nose and all those corn husk eyebrows and straw wigs and all those clothes, that nobody would recognise me. But it makes not the slightest bit of difference. I walk down the street and somebody says, "Ah, look here, there's old Wurzel." So there it goes. So it's the three, Wurzel, me, and the Doctor. And I'm not complaining. I like it.
John, thank you very much for joining us.
Now, the first behind-the-scenes insight today comes from monster makers Sue Moore and her partner Steve Mansfield. They'll be spending the day working on a monster mask before our very eyes. Steve, how do you start?
Right, well, the first thing that we would receive from the designer is, you know, his inspirations and ideas for the character.
A drawing.
A drawing, yeah. And then what we would do is simply, if it has to fit the actor perfectly, we would take a face cast of, you know, whoever it is.
And with plaster and straws and all the rest of straws up the nose.
Whole works, yeah. And then model straight onto that so that we know it's going to fit precisely and is going to move with his face and what have you. Now, what we're actually going to do today is a hemivore from a story called The Curse of Fenric, which went out, I think, last year. And so, as you see here, we've started modelling
with the
on a face
plasticine
cast
clay.
with clay, yeah. And the next stage from that would be a plaster cast, which is like
Right,
that.
so how do you get that then, Sue?
All right, first of all, we've taken a plaster mould, well, in this case a one-piece mould, off the front of the sculpture. And so now what we're left with is the face cast of the actor and the outer mould, which we call the negative, and then we have this, what we call the positive. And so basically what we do from then onwards is we get the latex, and actually, I won't brush in the whole thing. It's basically paint all around the outside with a brush or anything else that comes handy, all around the inside of the plaster. Well, when we've actually gone round to the whole edge of it, brought that right round the sides.
Does that dry as you go along? Or?
It does start to dry, depending on the weather. Would you believe it? A lot of warmth, like in the weather we've been having recently, it dries very quickly.
Yeah.
In cold days, obviously, it takes a bit longer.
And then?
We're basically, when we've painted in that, and we then paint the outside of the face cast.
And then you lift it up?
And then we just basically we're going to be placing this inside of the original plaster outer mould, and then we foam up the gap in between the two.
And we'll see the result?
Yes, later on, hopefully painted up.
Hopefully.
We'll look forward to speaking to you later.
Right, thanks a lot.
Our guide through the weekend is John Nathan Turner, the producer of Doctor Who throughout the 80s. So, what have you made of the day so far?
Well, terrific seeing so many old friends and some new ones, indeed. Especially two gentlemen who have joined us now, Nicholas Courtney, alias the Brigadier, and Terence Dix, who's got a mammoth track record of work on Doctor Who as a writer, script editor, novelist, etc. But more of Terence in a second. Nick, the War Games, an ideal story for the Brigadier?
Yes, it would have been, wouldn't it? But you see, the trouble is, obviously, I was being held in abeyance for something else, i.e. 2 seasons with Jon Pertwee. But the War Games actually did come right between, as I remember, the invasion of the Cybermen, which was Pat Troughton's penultimate story, and, of course, Spearhead from Space, which was Jon Pertwee's first. So I was obviously destined for other things.
Terence, it was a 10-part story. Why was it so long?
Simply because I think not one but 2 shows had collapsed for various reasons. I'm not sure whether the scripts had collapsed or the writers, but there was suddenly a 10-part gap in the schedules. And as sort of assistant script editor I was suddenly told, you are writing a 10-part show. So I joined up with Mac Hulk, who was a tremendously experienced writer and a great mate of mine. And we wrote it, as I remember, at something like the rate of a script every 2 days.
Good gracious.
Here and there it looks it, but, you know, by and large, I think we got away with it pretty well.
It's something of a landmark in terms of the Doctor's character and what we learn about his history. How were you involved in that?
Well, there was nothing more worked out then except the concept, the very vague concept that he was a Time Lord. And from that, Mac and I worked out that in order to solve the problem, he would have to contact his own people and thereby sacrifice his freedom and put himself up for recapture, which gave a kind of extra bite to the end of the show, and of course the justification for Patrick leaving and Jon Pertwee coming.
Taking over. Well, coming up after the break, the mammoth 10-part story starring Patrick Troughton as the Doctor, written by Terence and Malcolm Hulp, the epic adventure, The War Games, episodes 1 to 5.
Just when...
Hello. Wasn't it sad to see the end of Zoe and Jamie, but for Doctor Who to be banished forever to walk the earth? What a hideous fate.
Truly ghastly. Now, most of the time, the Doctor and his companions made their escape from tricky situations by leaping into the trusty TARDIS. It was never, of course, quite as simple as it sounds, but whenever they were in real trouble, you could be pretty sure that the Doctor or his companion would utter the famous line, "We've got to get back to the TARDIS."
You were safe in the TARDIS, are you sure? Well...
I'm going to try the controls. Be careful, Susan. Ow! No! Ow!
She's fainted. I used the fast return switch.
Fast return switch? Has the TARDIS ever been bedded up to its neck in lava before? Well, no. Well, how can you be so sure we're going to be all right?
We're safe now. Are you sure?
Yes, you can all relax. We're quite safe now.
I don't touch it, it's live! Oh, dear! The TARDIS! There's the TARDIS!
Back! Come back! Strange-looking craft. Must be very cramped and uncomfortable for 4 travellers inside at one time.
Yes.
Well, next in this Doctor Who weekend, we have a 5-part story from 1968. It features deadly robots called the Quarks, and you'll also spot Ronnie Crossroads Allen and Kenneth Last of the Mohicans Ives. So sit back for the Dominators.